How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China. And what you're looking at here is the platoon of the Dian army. Now, you might say to yourself, what the hell's the Dian army? Well, Yunnan is in the southwest corner of China. And it has borders internally with Guangzhou, Guizhou, Sichuan, Guangxi, Tibet, Burma, Vietnam and Laos. And there also is a train track that was built in 1894 from Vietnam to Yunnan, 895 kilometer railway that crosses the Jinsha river over a railway bridge. And the reason I mentioned Yunnan's position is because Yunnan as a place was always seen as to have a lot of potential. In the 1880s, Europeans were talking about Yunnan has everything they need: minerals, precious gems, and it's only there to be traded with. Now, this dream of a prosperous Yunnan, of the enrichment of Yunnan, or the settlement, the industrialization, whatever you want to term it, of Yunnan from a backwards state, from a backwards province into what is now an economic powerhouse in China, we have to look at one man, and that man is Long Yun. Now, Long Yun was born in 1884 at the foot of Salt Mountain and Jinsha River, and he was born as a minority, as a member of the ethnic Yi minority, of which Yunnan has the most minorities of all in China. Now, his father was a tribal leader, and when he was a young boy, his father was murdered violently in a dispute with another tribal head. This introduced Long Yun, or as he was, to give him his Yi name, Naji Niaoti, or Naji Jia. Well, this gave him an introduction into feuds and violence at an early age. Now, in the early, just before at the time Long Yun grew up, Yunnan was a backwards province. All of those potential of the province had not been achieved yet. Although when he was 10 years old, the French would finish their railway line, which would connect to Kunming, and this would slowly bring some change to Yunnan. Now, Long Yun was, as he grew up, he was a very rugged little kid. He liked martial arts, he liked horse riding, and he liked archery, and he excelled at these pastimes. When he was a teenager, his village was besieged by bandits, and after a few days of this, Long Yun, as a young teenager, came up with a plan, and he led hand-picked men from the village in a night attack on the bandits' encampment, and they slew many of the bandits in their sleep, captured more, and drove the rest away. Now this brought the young Long Yun to the attention of an imperial magistrate. And the imperial magistrate was so impressed with Long Yun that he gave him an official warrant and a title to go after bandits on the west bank of the Jinsha River. Now he was young, and he made his way home and quickly gathered a group of his friends and a group of 20 of his friends and family, and they got to the Jinsha River and it was swollen with rain, but he commandeered a ferry to make the crossing to the west bank. Unfortunately, the ferry capsized in the swollen waters, and Long Yun was the only survivor. Now this had an effect on Long Yun, because the men that he had taken under his leadership were now all dead, and they were all family and friends from his village. So he felt he couldn't return there. So instead, with his young cousin Lu Han, he headed for the Sichuan-Yunnan border and joined the forces of Zai Ru Yi. And after serving with Zai Ru Yi for a few years, Zai Ru Yi was very impressed with him. And during the fighting to establish the Republic, Long Yun earned a very good reputation as a clever commander, a good tactician, but also a man who was very hands-on logistically. He was a master of campaigning, even in the war doors with those limited resources he would have underrated with. He was always managing to get his troops fed and supplied, and his men. He was good with logistics. He realized how important logistics was. Now, he was such a bright candidate that Zhao Ruyi decided that he needed to go to the Yunnan Military Academy so that he could fulfill his potential. Now, by the time him and his cousin got to the Yunnan Military Academy, the time for the entrance examination was over. But Zhao Ruyi must have pulled a few strings with Tang Jijiao, who was the governor of Yunnan, because both lads, and Long Yun would have been 28 at this time and Lu Han would have been 17, sat the examination and were accepted into the Yunnan Military Academy. Now, it doesn't seem that Long Yun shone in the academic sense at the Yunnan Academy, but as far as athletics was concerned, he was always a star of the athletics track and sporting events. Now, in some time during between 9/11 and his graduation in 1914, a professional French boxer arrived in Kunming and arrived at the academy and challenged all takers, any takers, and his intention was to set up a dojo in Kunming. And he insulted the masters who were teaching the martial arts at the academy, and this was a direct insult to Zhang Jijiao. So a fight was arranged. Now this French boxer had already beaten every other fighter, and Long Yun got in the ring. And even though the fight went for a few rounds, Long Yun dominated the whole fight and knocked the guy out. Knocked this Frenchman out. Now this made him a very big favourite of Tang Zhijiao. And on graduation, he would enter Tang Zhijiao's Dian army or Yunnan army, and he would serve from. Because when he went to the academy, he was already taken on by Tang Jiao. That's how they got the exemption. So he served under Zhang Yao first as a cadet, and then as a regimental commander in charge of a town called Mengzi, and eventually he would become a corps commander. Now, everything I'm telling you comes from the works of Vinci, Leslie Ness, and believe it or not, the official records, including the Chinese state media, of Long Yun. Because Long Yun being a warlord and being on the nationalist side, I want to show you in this video how a warlord could be accepted, and how some warlords were just so good at their bloody job, and Long Yun was one of them, that the communists didn't try to, they took power in Yunnan, and it was Lu Han who was there to hand over power to the communists. But then they soon found a post for Long Yun. But we'll get to that later in the story. So Tang Jiao in 1922 faced a coup, and the coup was very successful, and he found himself retreating down the railway line, down the Kunming Road to Mengzi. Now, when he arrived in Mengzi, he was greeted by Long Yun, who was the Mengzi garrison commander, and he stopped there. And Tang Zhijiao was impressed by how many peasants came to show their support for him, and how Tang, even though he could have easily joined the other side and got a better deal, stayed loyal. Long Yun stayed loyal to Tang, and they were able to raise forces, and retake Kunming. Now, as reward for this, Long Yun was elevated in Tang's eyes, and became a corps commander. Now, that all sounds good, but so it was 1922 by the time Tang Jiao had defeated Tu Bin Zhen to regain control of Sichuan Yunnan armies and the governments of Yunnan. And for the second time, Long Yun was rewarded with a position as Kunming garrison commander. So now he's gone from Mengzi to Kungzi, but the men he leaves behind in Mengzi are still under his charge. Now, on the 14th of June 1927, two more Yunnan factions attacked Kunming, attempting to remove Tang Jiao in a coup. These were uncertain times, and Long Yun realized he could not support Tang anymore. So he cut a deal for him to step down, for Tang to step down without being harmed. And the leadership of Yunnan was shared among the four garrison commanders. 4 months later, Long Yun himself, my notes are all over the place. Now, when his Tang had stepped down, Dong had to share leadership of the 4th Garrison Commanders, and it wasn't long before one of them made a move on him. And in the ensuing fighting, while Long Yun was right there at the front with his men, his rifle exploded in his face. And this would leave him with devastated eyesight. This was devastated eyesight. He would never really recover more than 20% of his eyesight. And he was hospitalized for 3 months. And from that day on, he received this, the nickname, the One-Eyed Dragon. He had a few nicknames. One of them was the One-Eyed Dragon. Now, he was captured and imprisoned in an iron cage, and his eye wound just got worse. And but he still had a loyal army in the field. Nobody had, his troops were very loyal to him, and his captors did not dare execute him. Now, luckily for him, his cousin Liu Han had also risen within the ranks of the Yunnan army under Tang Jiao. And in July 1926, Liu Han leads an assault to take Kunming. Kunming falls, and Long Yun is released. And then he entered in more negotiations with the other factions. Now, they all agreed to the Banqiao Agreement, and which meant Long Yun would become governor of Yunnan. So from 1927 to 1945, Long Yun governed Yunnan. And Long Yun decided that the province needed total change from the top to the bottom. The Yunnan was run out of debt. It had been a long time since the state coffers had covered the outgoings. They had to import food. Wheat crop was low. Banditry was rife. Illiteracy was more common than banditry. Roads were few, and those that were plagued by bandits. So many problems that Long Yun faced. But one of the first problems he would face in 1928, when Chiang had launched the Northern Expedition, Long Yun had supported him from day one and launched his own campaign to deal with Guominjun elements within Yunnan and from the areas. So he had supported Chiang totally. Now, in 1929, Chiang told the warlords that had aligned themselves with him that they needed to reorganize their forces. Now, I'm going to stop here and just say I'm going to be going for a long time, so piss off now. There's your platoon of Yunnan Army. I'm doing it this way because I thought you'd enjoy the story, and I will certainly enjoy telling it. And because this channel is a free channel, I do what I like. So go get yourself a drink, because this is going to go on for quite a while before I actually get to the details of the army. Because you can't talk about Long Yun's army and not tell you about Long Yun. That's just, the two were just bonded. So Chiang had all the military forces, including the warlords, to reorganize themselves. And that meant basically to lessen the number of their armies, you know what I mean? Get rid of some troops. And this, when you ask a warlord to do this that's in a faction or a clique, you're really asking him a lot. And this sparked the Great Plains War. And again, Yunnan supports Chiang, and Long Yun attempts to make his factions bend to these rules. But of course, there's a rebellion. Now, even his cousin, Lu Han, is part of the rebellion. And the thing is that gives the rebellion teeth is because of Long Yun's reforms on the agricultural sector. This is now the money from the landlords, and from landowners. So these two have come together, and they don't want to do the army reforms. And they are marching on Kunming. So Yon Lung turns to Chiang, and he says, "I'm doing this for you. You wanted these reorganizations. I need some help or I'll be out." So just by Chiang contacting the reprobate other faction members, Lu Han, Zhu Zhu, and Zhang Chong, just the phone calls from Chiang is enough for these men. Because I want you to understand that all these men are Republicans. They all were part of the National Republican movement. And they did see Chiang as a legitimate leader of China. So that was enough for them to step down. Now, a couple of months later, they were back at it again. And this time, Long Yun, for the first time ever, shows his brilliance. Now, he has already launched the New Yunnan Initiative, which will change Yunnan culturally, agriculturally, industrially, commercially, financially. It will change so much of Yunnan. And the men who are going to do it and do the best jobs of it are the actual factions that were against him. He got the deal. Lu Han became head of finance and head of the Ministry of Finance. Zhu Zhu became head of the Civil Service Administration, and Zhang Chong, head of salt transport. Now, all of those positions will allow those commanders, or now civil servants, bureaucrats now, to still take their bite. What will happen now in Yunnan is a metamorphosis. One of the first things Long Yun does is to address the economy. And to that end, he starts to buy in old yuan notes and to print new notes. First of all, he makes silver dollars, and then he has notes. And it's not like he says to people, "All right, there's no 500 yuan note anymore, so you've lost your money." He lets people bring their money in and transfer and exchange it for the new yuan in a very methodical and ordered way. Now, the reason he can do this is because obviously Lu Han, who is head of the finance ministry, is right on his side. But also, Yunnan is changing. And I'm going to tell you how. If we look at the exports of Yunnan, timber, tin, silver, precious stones, ivory, tea, tobacco. So that's quite a long list, isn't it? But there's another one we've got to add on, and that's opium. Now, Tang Jiao had basically run his whole economy on opium. And why not? It was a cash crop. He needed the cash. He was in constant war. So to grow opium was a good solution for Tang Jiao. And let's be pragmatic. With the abolition of opium had still left tens of millions of addicts in China with no form of rehab, and addicts are addicts. It doesn't matter, they'll go get their gear. So if you're a leader, governor of a province that has had money coming in from opium, as Yunnan has, then how you cannot have a crop to replace it. It's going to take time and effort and the actual want, because it's going to be a loss if you get rid of that industry. So Long Yun is, like everything in this war, it's a bit of a contradiction, because at the same time as he's campaigning that people shouldn't smoke cigarettes, that it's bad for you, complaining, trying to make people instill a sense of civic responsibility into people. He had an anti-smoking campaign, and this was because he could see in Yunnan's books how much, although Yunnan did grow tobacco, it was of very poor quality, and you could see in the trade books that Yunnan was importing more tobacco than it was selling, and tobacco wasn't big as a cash crop. Now this all leads on to a food shortage in Yunnan, because why was there a food shortage in Yunnan when it's actually a breadbasket? Because the peasants had either been forced into growing opium, or they were just growing enough to survive because they couldn't get anything to market and then get home with the cash, because the bandit problem was so bad. So therefore, the countryside wasn't producing enough food, so food had to be imported. And then let's look at silver, at tin. Now Yunnan produced quite a bit of tin, but it all had to be exported to Hong Kong and so sold through dealers there, because it wasn't of a purity enough to be traded on the London Exchange. So all of these problems, and there were many more, lack of roads, slowly but surely, Long Yun, with his 10-year Yunnan initiative, would set about making many changes in the province. Now, one of the first changes he did was with the military. And now he wanted a mobile force that could secure his borders, a smaller mobile force. And as I said, if you ask the warlords to give up troops, that's asking them to keep their power up, so they don't want to do that. So there's a good compromise he makes. What you're going to need to do with bandits? It's going to need a lot of policemen. So, when the warlords shrug off the numbers of troops they have, they know that the policemen that are going to be trained up and serving in their areas are their men. It's a win-win for everyone. So in theory, the warlords don't lose any strength in their vicinity, but there are people now trained, armed and equipped to deal with law and order and banditry and piracy. Now, that's the first step. The second step is to do some agricultural reform, so that some crops can start hitting the markets. Now Longyun does this because once the roads become safer, peasants start to grow more. More gets to market, and they start to grow crops that are larger. Now I'm going to say this: Yunnan had been importing wheat, and within 4 years of Longyun's rule, there's a surplus in wheat. So by 1932, there's a surplus every year in wheat, and Longyun does not sell this off. He builds silos and grain and storage because he knows, or it seems like he knew, that there was very interesting times to come for China. And he also knew that with foreign reserves, what they were, if he had this to sell next year to his own, if next year's crops failed, he would have something. So long-term planning there. And now let's get back to the mines. Now, he brought in, and I wish I could remember the chap's name, but this was a professor, a metallurgist, who was going to oversee Yunnan's tin industry, tin mines. And what he did was he introduced, because he knew the design, he was educated in Europe, he introduced modern smelting techniques. So within a year, Yunnan is no longer reliant on sending its tin to Hong Kong to be dealt with by merchants at very little profit, to having the purity to be able to trade on the London markets. And that is a huge boon for the economy. So there we are, the first 4 years there. The wheat production's gone up, food production's gone up, inflation has ended, the yuan is a steady currency, banditry has been eradicated. There's almost a free press. Yunnan has its reputation by 1934, 1935 of being the most open province in all of China, the most democratic place with very little corruption. And I want to tell you how the warlords would get rid of corruption. If there was a form that was a government form that should be free, and a bribe from the officials to say, oh, you'd put that form in and I'll lobby for you, there was no such thing as that. Now you paid a fee for that government form, and that form would be dealt with in a very judicial way. As I said, Yunnan was fast becoming a place where the bureaucracy worked, very little corruption, because Longyun had found a way to divert cash into his men's pockets without it being a bribe. So, with this excess in currency, by 1933, Yunnan is starting to have a little bit of an what is it? Deficit is when you haven't got money, but when you've got more money, a little bit of surplus cash. And Longyun starts to build roads. Now, if we know Longyun means King of the South. And he was the King of the South. Now, with the roads he would build, as I said, there were economic hubs. And Longyun is the man who builds what you know as the original Burma Road. He builds that. I said it would take him 3 years. He got it done in a year. He was that organised. But not only that, the supply, his workers were more healthy. Only 6 men died per mile building the Burma Road. And now that sounds horrific in modern times. But in those times, building a slope along a mountain with no equipment, just hammers and hand tools, and knowing, as we do, all the diseases and viruses you could pick up. That is a very low figure. Very, very low figure. And again, it's his genius for logistics, for supply. So, come 1934, Long Yun has reorganised his army. And his army is now about 25,000 men. And the police force in Yunnan is about 35,000 men. All trained to military standards. Now, Long Yun, as I said, is having a surplus every year. The roads that he's built, the agricultural reform he's done, the work he's done on tin mines, and he's still got the opium money. Don't ever think that he got rid of the opium, because don't have morals about it. These are warlords. These are different times, and when you know people are hungry and you're fighting for survival in your area, growing opium for the European to be turned into heroin for the European market. Well, they're going to suffer. Maybe it's not morally right, but he doesn't have the cash to say no. Because morality is about how much cash you have. The richer you are, the more you can afford morality. The poorer you are, the less you can afford it. And if you are in a wealthy position, like Long Yun, but you know how poor the people are, and that opium provides something for them, why would you take it away? Why would you take it away? Leave modern morality out of this. Now, so by 1934, Long Yun is starting to buy arms on the open market. And he can do this because he can import them through France, he can import them through Vietnam, through France and Vietnam, or he can get his arms. And he's got the money for him, hasn't he? He's got the cash. Because now he's got petroleum too. Yes, Yunnan has discovered oil, and he sort of exporting a few barrels. They're now refining it. They're not exporting it for exports. It's just being used within the province. But it will be the beginning. It will be the beginning of Yunnan being able to produce high octane fuel for aircraft, whereas the rest of the country couldn't do it. So all of this made him the king. And all of this comes from the communist sources. And it's not bad, is it? You would expect him to, he was a warlord, but no. Very practical about it. So, when he was buying arms, he wasn't just buying arms for his 25,000 troops and 35,000 policemen. He was buying tens of thousands of arms. And his army will grow between 1935 and 1938. His army will grow to 360,000. And he equips them very well. The Yunnan army is the best equipped army in China. And although that might change by it could be arguable if it ever does change. So why, as I said, he's got a stable currency. He's got open borders. He's in good with Chang. He's going to build himself an army. And let's look at him during World War II. When Claire Chennault, Long Yun was approached to, I want to start earlier. Now, when the Italians wanted to have their contribution to the defense of China, the Italian squadron, it was based in Yunnan, in Kunming. And one of the deals that Long Yun cut with the Italians was a training program for aircraft fitters. So while the Italians and the French actually were in Yunnan operating, they were training Yunnan fitters and mechanics. Not so much flyers. Because Long Yun always got a deal out. Always got something extra. For himself, but for his own province. because he was a genuinely good leader. So let's look at the Americans. When the Americans approached him, we want to base airplanes in Yunnan at Kunming. What did he ask for? Well, he was very shrewd. As I said, tobacco in Yunnan was of such bad quality that lots of locals imported their own cigarette. All the cigarettes people smoked tobacco was all imported. Well, the majority of it was. So Long Yun said to the Americans, you can do this. He wanted a few other things too, but one of the deals he said was, I want Virginia tobacco seeds. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Virginia tobacco seeds it was illegal to export them. But he got a few sacks with the deal. And now, if you're in China, live in China and you smoke cigarettes made in China, the odds are that tobacco in it is Virginia tobacco grown in Yunnan. And this tobacco, as I said, it helped the economy. It was a big step forward for China now, because China was importing lots of tobacco. Now that she had the good seeds of Virginia tobacco growing in Yunnan, it would feed her own domestic market. So that's just another example of what a dealer, of what a mover, what a visionary Long Yun was. Now, the king of the south and his DN army. So a platoon of the DN army is 3 13-man sections and an officer NCO. Each section is 8 riflemen, and each of these men have a rifle. And 4 men in an LMG section, 1 LMG, and the other 3s would not be issued rifles. The LMG could either be a French model. I think where's the French MG called? I can't remember, but the top fed French MG, Czech LMGs. I mean, I've gone for the French one here, but I mean, there's ZBs, but you can't tell the difference between them and the French ones, I think, No, not a 20mm scale. So, and actually there's the Caesar figure, so that is the right LMG. So he was importing, mainly the men were equipped with, by 1934, French LMGs and Mauser rifles. Now there's a lot of talk of Italian rifles being imported by Long Yun, but I've seen that on interviews. People's claiming it on interviews, but I've never actually read anything of that. But Long Yun might have been buying rifles to provide to other warlords as deals, because all the warlords, if one of the warlords says, if Cheng says to one lord, well, you can't buy any weapons, the first thing he'll go and do is talk to another warlord and say, oh well, just put something on for me on those ones he's allowing you. So maybe Long Yun, maybe a lot more warlords and powerful people in China owed Long Yun a favour than we will ever know. So that's a 40-man rifle platoon. Now, the list I'm giving you was just a bayonet exercise. Now, in 1937, in July 1937. Now, I'll say it again. In September 1937, Chiang himself had said to the warlords, bring your forces, I need your men at Shanghai. It's now time for you to fight. And the warlords did that. But Long Yun had been on the phone on July the 17th, that day of the Marco Bridge incident, to Chiang, pledging his unwavering support. So Long Yun and the Yunnan army was the first one to support Chiang. Of all the provincial armies, that is. So why do we not see DN soldiers in Shanghai? Well, I want to say this. When I'm saying DN army, the DN Empire, the DN Kingdom was a kingdom that existed in, a culture that existed in Western Yunnan from about the 3rd century BC to the 1st century BC. And it was the Dian kingdom. And as memories are long in China, soldiers and forces from Dian are called the Dian army. So this is a Dian army. These are Dian soldiers, or they're Long Yun soldiers. So this is why you might read, or when I read accounts who kept saying Dian, 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 I'm like, how are they calling them Dian? Dian existed for 2,000 years. But as I said, the Chinese have got long memories, so they were Dian troops. I'll be labeling these troops as Dian. D-I-A-N. Now, as I said, these are just the bayonet strength. And this is the bayonet strength of the 60th Army. Because when Long Yun sent his first army, under the command of Lu Han, the 60th Army, they marched to Wuhan. But they didn't march straight to Wuhan, because Chiang asked them to do him a favor. He wanted these troops to march all the way through China. Not go to Shanghai and be blown to bits or become cannon fodder. He wanted these troops for the morale purposes that the population of China would have, seeing such well-equipped, well-trained, well-led, armed soldiers, Chinese army soldiers, heading for the front. So the march of the Yunnan army to Wuhan was a publicity drive. But it was the right army to do it. It was superbly equipped, men in boots, each with a rifle, enough LMGs, and let's look now. So 3 sections, 40 men for the platoon. 3 platoons plus a HQ to make a company. Now, the force I'm giving you here is for the 60th Army. Now, how did the 60th Army manage to march for so long? Because Long Yun is visionary. And remember, he's built roads. And he wanted a mobile army. So there are plenty of trucks in the 60th Army. I wouldn't say that, they're at the Japanese, above the Japanese strength, but as I said, Long Yun understands logistics. So every regiment in the Yunnan army always has a transport company of 300 men. It's something you don't usually find in the other Chinese formations. It's usually taken from the infantry formations. But as I said, Long Yun was a buyer of trucks. So when he sent his army on the big long march to Wuhan, circuitously, he had the trucks to supply and equip it. Now when the 60th Army eventually does fight and reach the front lines at Yuang Mountain, it does a tremendous job. It stops the Japanese cold on the Yuang Mountain. And it's a shame because the Yuang Mountain is not as known as the Battle of Changsha by Western authors. Because, if we look at the Battle of Changsha, and we'll be doing it one day, you can't talk about the Battle of Changsha without the Yunnan Army, the Lu Han 60th Army. But their first combat against Japanese was at Yuang Mountain. Now, I gotta get a drink. I think we've got another 5-10 minutes, guys. So remember, when I put this down, I play rapid fire. So when I play rapid fire, I field, for the Yunnan Army, I field 3 companies of 10 men a pop. Now the figures are Caesar and Airfix, and they've all had the long coats chopped down, shaved off, or leg swaps. So that would be, hang on, and this is for the Battle of Yuang Mountain, 60th Army. The formation will change later, and it will have less fire support. So you've got 3 companies, 10 figures each of an LMG, a support company, 2 LMGs, and a French 60mm mortar. Now, HQ is 4 men. So we know straight away that for machine guns, there was very many different sources. These are French Hotchkiss, but you could use Type 1010s, or sometimes the Austrian weapon. Is it the Schwarzlos SM LMGs. So for a battalion, give them 2 trucks. So there you go. There's your DN Army for the Battle of Yuan or Jinsha at the battalion strength for rapid fire. So for a regiment, you would think, it's 3 of them, but it's not. The 3rd company, the 3rd battalion of the regiment should get an 81mm mortar. And then if you want to support the regiment, and all these weapons I'll be introducing you to, but you could have the Hotchkiss twin 13.2mm anti-aircraft. As I said, the Yunnan Army is beautifully equipped. So 2 AA LMGs. This is for the regimental support. This is the regiment I have built. 20mm. Yeah, you could have any. You could have Madsen, you could have Oerlikon, Solothurn. And HQ. Just move this around a bit so we can see what we're doing. So yeah, Long Yun built quite a capable army. As the war progressed, of course, he couldn't keep up quite as much equipment to each forces, so the number of MGs drops as the war progresses. But everything here, as you notice, is heavily based on French infantry formations, and it's no surprising because the Yunnan Military Academy, which closed its doors in 1928, was manned, had a lot of French teachers tutors from France. The Yunnan Army itself, there was especially in the 60th Army, there were quite a few officers that were graduates of the French Sancerre Military Academy, which gives the the Yunnan, or the army of Diane, a love for professionalism that other armies just didn't have. We will always, I mean, the Germanized formations will always get the lion's share of what people think with the elite Chinese formations. But if you watch this channel, you know that it's not true. And you also know that even some of the most derided units were able to distinguish themselves in the battlefield, especially provincial units. So, you know, you could have one or two of these. I'm going to put another gun here. I'm not going to tell you about that. I'll do a video on it. So, you could also field the 60mm mortars independently as a light mortar company if you don't want to put them in your HQ. HQ? And finally, to support the regiment, obviously. Let's use 75mm Mountain guns. So there you go. That's the army of Long Yun, the King of Yunnan's army, the Dian army. I hope you realize how much effort it has gone into building these armies and the research that has gone into it. And I hope that makes you hit like and subscribe. This army we'll be seeing on the table very soon for the Battle of Yuan. Listen, if this was too much waffle for you, I don't really care. So you take care. See ya.